Chapter 13. The Grand Matriarch stared silently into the darkness, her great act of revenge thwarted at its final turn. In the corner, Fetch cowered, uncertain of his mistress's mood. She had been silent for the last half hour, the only sound that of her 12 fingers drumming a beat on the arms of her chair. A stream of light illuminated her tired and worn face as the door opened. Reptu entered the room and bowed to the matriarch. He acknowledged Fetch with some distaste. "My lady, the doctor has failed our tests," she said tonelessly, not looking at Reptu. "How goes the search for the Earth Child?" "Companions have been dispatched to both Kirith and the Darkfell, my lady, and our spies are already searching the area," he replied. "Ensure that she is not harmed," the matriarch reminded him. "I care nothing for the Kirithons, but the Earthchild is useless to us dead. She must be brought in alive." "And the doctor?" The Grand Matriarch smiled, an evil twisted smile. "Let him live too," she said. "The strings of destiny are drawing us ever closer. Soon he too will come to us." She stood up, towering over even the tall Reptu. "And then, before the end, let him pay for 5,000 years of suffering and torment." After the destruction of the homunculus, Aaron had led her party under cover of darkness directly across the moors. When Myril had suggested that it might be better first following the coastline, as Ace, Aaron and Kaz had done when they approached the harbours, she had retorted that such an escape route would be exactly what the Pangistri were expecting. Guards would already have been posted along that way. The more open route across the moors would be exactly what they weren't expecting, and her and Raphael's knowledge of the terrain would work strongly in their favour. Ace had bridled at the older woman's orders, but as they approached the foot of Kirith town, she had reluctantly to admit that Aaron had been right. They had not seen one patrol since they left the harbours. "Now what?" asked Raphael as they stood at the foot of the winding steps leading to the town. "We need to get to Kandassi to rescue the Professor," began Ace. "So how is coming back here going to help?" "Use your head, sunshine. After your little Nitro 9 party, the harbours are going to be crawling with guards for a while. Back here at least we can hide out, and maybe raise some support." "Tanyel may help," suggested Myril. Kraz stiffened at the mention of the name. "Tanyel?" mocked Ace. "Old Frosty Chops, do me a favour." Myril smiled. "Tanyel may surprise you, Ace," he said. "For all her conformity, she still has an open mind, and she commands great respect amongst the teachers and seminarians." Seeing that Ace wasn't convinced, he added, "Can you suggest anyone else?" Ace had to admit that she couldn't. "If you two have finished your little debate, could we get a move on?" asked Aaron irritably. "Soon the whole place is going to be infested with the Pangistri and their servants." "How do we get up there?" "There's a tunnel which leads to the upper levels," volunteered Myril. "It was once used to pump water into the town from an underground stream." "It's the first I've heard of it," said Raphael. "You don't have the monopoly on willfulness, Raphael," Myril said smugly. "I discovered it when I was a boy. I got into the most terrible trouble with Huldar for it." "What you are saying cannot be so, Myril," protested Tanyel as she paced around one of the study cells in the seminary. In the middle of the night the seminary was quiet and dark. Only a few restless scholars were in the great library, accessing the computers or reading what they thought to be an ancient manuscript from centuries past. "Why don't you believe a word he's been saying?" asked Ace. "The Pangistri work only for our benefit, young woman, and have done so for many thousands of years," she reminded her frostily. "All our well-being and sustenance comes from them." "So why look us up? Why poison the Darkfell? Why attack Ace?" countered Raphael. "Why breed that thing at the harbours?" "The Pangistri have their reasons that we need not understand," intoned Tanyel, "but I thank them for their great munificence." "At least worms turn," muttered Ace under her breath and turned away. "You are an alien who doesn't understand our ways," Tanyel replied. "Do you thank them for their great munificence when that includes Zavat?" Myril asked pointedly. "A sick story. I would have thought better of you, Myril," Tanyel said haughtily. To believe such obscenity, and on the word of such as these... She indicated Aaron and Kraz, who had remained silently in the corner, their faces hidden in the shadows and the folds of their ragged clothes. Muriel beckoned to Aaron, who stepped out of the darkness and removed the cowl from her head. "Now do you believe him, old woman?" Aaron spat the words out. "This is what the Pangistri do." Tanyel blanched at the sight of Aaron's translucent skin and her nerves and veins which pounded and throbbed with rage. Aaron waved her gun threateningly before her. Tanyel stepped back in alarm and reached for Muriel's arm. "An abomination," she said, so softly that only Muriel heard her. "No, Tanyel, the truth." Tanyel collected herself rapidly and addressed Aaron. "Whatever you are, you have nothing to do with me." Before Aaron could reply, Kraz stepped out of the shadows. He walked slowly towards Tanyel, who looked at him strangely. She averted her eyes as she saw the scars and blisters on his face, but then something made her turn back. Kraz smiled crookedly and held out a burnt, peeling hand in greeting. "Hello, Tanyel." Tanyel's eyes narrowed as she took in the sight of the monster before her. The proud face, still handsome despite its scars, the hair, once black and thick but now white and wispy, recalled a far distant memory to her. She frowned as long controlled emotions struggled to overcome the Pangistri's conditioning. As Tanyel took a step towards him, Muriel too remembered where he had seen the surgeon before. "Kraz." The word fell leaden from Tanyel's lips. Kraz nodded sadly and backed away. But Tanyel moved close to him, and he winced as she delicately touched his blisters and scars. "You were so handsome once," she said wonderingly. "How did this happen to you?" "The Pangistri," he replied. "They may have twisted and destroyed our bodies, but they distorted and stole your minds." Tanyel continued to stroke his face fondly, and gazed at him wide-eyed. "I remember I was so proud of you when you went to work for the Pangistri. On that day you were so beautiful. I thought there was no one luckier than me, and then... She frowned as she tried in vain to recapture her lost memories. "And then... why did I forget you?" The room was silent. Even Aaron and Ace didn't dare say a word as the old woman tried to come to terms with a world which had just been turned upside down. She looked back at Muriel and then to Ace. "All you have told me is true?" "Every word of it," said Ace softly, suddenly aware of what Tanyel was going through. Tanyel took a deep breath, and something within her seemed to snap. "Then the Pangistri shall not be allowed to deceive us for one moment longer," she stated flatly. With a last look at Kraz, she strode determinedly out of the room. Before Ace could ask Muriel where she had gone, the nighttime quiet of the seminary buildings was shattered by the repeated clanging of a loud bell. A thrill coursed through Muriel's body. Tanyel, who had obeyed the Pangistri all her life, never quite understanding why she could not feel love for another person, now saw the truth. The worm had turned. Now she was arousing the seminary of Kirith from centuries of blind and unquestioning obedience. "Kraz was her lover, it seems, all those years ago," Raphael explained to Ace as they sat waiting in Tanyel's rooms. "But once he had left, the Zavat made her forget." "Who'd have thought of it? She seemed the proper Ice Queen," whistled Ace. "And now she's called all the teachers together in the great library." "You had a lot to do with it, Ace." Ace looked at him inquiringly. "What do you mean?" "You and the doctor have thrown everything into doubt, made us think for ourselves for the first time in years." "I always cause trouble, even at school," she said cheerfully. "Did I ever tell you about the time I almost blew up the art room?" He laughed. "There's never been anyone on Kirith like you. Are there any more of you back in Perryvale?" "Nah, I'm the only one. Who'd have the nerve to make two of me?" "I'm glad." They sat in silence for a while, and then Raphael ventured, "Ace, if we ever get out of this, do you think the doctor would let me come with you?" Ace hesitated. "You'd better ask him," she said awkwardly, "but if you want to go tramping around the cosmos, I don't see why not." "That isn't the only reason, you know." The door opened suddenly, and Muriel regarded them with a knowing eye. He coughed loudly. Ace stood up sharply from the couch where she had been sitting with Raphael. Ace, you wouldn't happen to have any more of your hiccups in paradise, would you? Ace looked blankly at him until Raphael explained. No, Sunshine Features here used up the last of them, she said proudly. Why? It's been decided that we will confront Lord Holdar with our demand that production of Zavat should stop immediately, and that all allegations against the Pangistri are examined, he said. If he refuses, we will destroy the Zavat production plant ourselves. Ace sighed and stood up. And you think that slimeball was going to listen to you? I pressed for more direct action, but Ace cut him short. You got to strike now, when he's least prepared. Then what would you suggest? Get Joe Public on our side. She thought for a moment. Where's the Zavat produced? At the harbours, as you saw, he said. It's then piped over land where it's processed and refined and then distributed. And where's it distributed from? The council house. Computers calculate the amount needed by every person for each day. Ace brightened and strode purposefully to the door. Well, are you coming or not? She asked in mock irritation. Where to? The council house, of course, she said brightly. Come on! I can't start a revolution all on my own, you know. Revna looked bleary-eyed at the Lord Procurator Huldar as he strolled restlessly about his offices. She had never seen her master so agitated before. Taniel's call to assembly had awoken Huldar and many other Kirathans, who now wondered nervously why the bell, which tolled only on festival days, had been sounded in the dead of night. He stopped by a window and pointed out into the night, down to the seminary building. Lights were blazing in every window and casement. The massive oak doors had been closed and bolted for the first time in living memory. What is happening down there, Revna? He asked. Why are the teachers turning their place of learning into a fortress? In all matters save one, Revna could read people like a book. And although his voice was steady, she still detected the fearful apprehension that gripped the Lord Procurator's heart. Not without a slight feeling of satisfaction, she realised that he was frightened. Things were slipping slowly out of his control. Can we not see into the seminary, Lord? She asked. Huldar indicated a bank of monitor screens on the far wall. Dead. Every blasted one of them, he said angrily. Ace, guessed Revna, and was filled with loathing. Huldar agreed. Only she could identify and disconnect our concealed cameras. The others wouldn't even recognise them for what they are. The secret entrances? As a member of Huldar's retinue, Revna knew that the entire town of Kirith was honeycombed with secret underground passages. Every one leading to the seminary is blocked, he replied, wondering how the teachers could have known of them. It was impossible for such as Huldar to imagine the curiosity of the young Mirill as he explored his hometown, or indeed to understand Taniel, who had known about the passageways for years, but had chosen not to reveal their existence until now. Then what can we do, Huldar? Asked Revna, and noted with interest that her master was so preoccupied that he did not register her informal use of his name. I have informed Lord Reptu, Huldar said. There is nothing we can do yet. Nothing, that is, but wait. Involuntarily, his eyes looked up at Kirith's two moons, and he mouthed a silent prayer. Huldar was wrong. Not all the passages leading into the seminary had been blocked. One, forgotten by everyone except Raphael, who had used it once as a boy to get to the council house and there drop a few homemade stink bombs, was still open. It was through this that Ace and Mirill were hurrying, even as Taniel, Raphael, Aaron and Kraz debated the next course of action with the teachers assembled in the great library. This isn't the safest of times to be conducting a raid on the council house, complained Mirill, as he led Ace through the half-light of the tunnel. Just why do we need to go there anyway? I told you, Ace said brightly. I've got a plan. Mirill sighed. I wish you would tell me what it is. Later, she promised. They reached a door which Ace pushed open warily. There's no one about, she whispered, and stepped out into a small, cluttered storeroom. Where are all the guards? We don't need them. Everyone on Kirith is trusted implicitly, Mirill said ironically. God knows how you lot would manage on cup final nights in the West End, Ace said to herself. It's too quiet, she remarked aloud, as Marill led her up a flight of stairs and onto a broad landing. It is the middle of the night, Ace, Marill reminded her, and opened the door. This is the place you wanted. They entered a brightly lit room, empty except row upon row of desktop computers and printers, noisily spewing out reams of information. This is serious stuff, said Ace, as she inspected the nearest model. Much more advanced than the ones you use. She flipped through the plastic-covered pages of a huge file. These are programming instructions, she said. I thought you didn't know how to program. We've no need to, Marill said defensively. Everything is controlled from here. But who programs and initializes the computers? Huldar and his immediate circle program the machines and ensure that all our needs are met. Revna too? Marill nodded. Ace made a pretense of looking through the file and then said casually, Why does she hate me so much? You're different from everyone else here. Revna hates that, and the effect that you have on men like Raphael. He smiled. Even I, as an old man, have noticed that. Ace coloured and changed the subject. It was time to put her plan into operation. She tossed the programming manual onto a desk. She'd found the access code she needed. The Kirithans trust the Pangistri because they provide them with all they need, right? Their food, their light, their heat. Yes. And if anything goes wrong, the Zavat, which is their main source of food, guarantees that they forget and remain placid. You know all that, Ace. So what would happen if something went wrong with their food source? The idea had never occurred to Marill. He looked at Ace with newly found admiration. What do you suggest? Ace sat down at a keyboard and made a great display of flexing her fingers like a pianist about to play a piece of music. Miss Sydenham in computer studies always said I had untapped skills, she said. Half the time we ended up playing Space Invaders, though. But there was one thing I was really mega brilliant at. Want to know what it was? I shudder to think, Ace. What was it? Wiping programs, she replied, and gave Marill a malevolent grin. Hours passed, and a bright cold day dawned over Kirith. In his personal quarters, Huldar picked thoughtfully at a breakfast of meat and eggs as he waited for the message from the Pangistri. Over the video link from Kandassi, the Lord Reptu had told him to calm himself. The Earthchild had now been located. Let her remain in the seminary. All would be well, he assured him. The Pangistri were so superior, so damned rational, fumed Huldar, that at times they underestimated the creatures to whom they were so insufferably generous. Like gods, they presided over life on Kirith without ever once understanding the passions and furies which drove the people living on that planet. The Doctor was dangerous, both to the Pangistri and to Huldar's power base on Kirith. Huldar knew that, and that was why he had tried to kill him. But especially now that the Doctor was on Kandassi Island and safely out of the way, Ace was even more of a threat. If she was so important to the Pangistri's mysterious plan, let them take her now. Every moment she spent in Kirith threatened his rule. Let the Pangistri deal with matters of cosmic importance, while he, Huldar, got on with the job of running Kirith. The door opened and Revna walked in, carrying a batch of reports. Huldar looked up from his breakfast. It's customary to knock, Revna, he said sourly. Revna stiffened for a moment and then apologised. I have just received dreadful news, my lord, she began. Huldar came round the table and snatched the papers from her hand. As he read them, his face darkened. No one on Kirith had received their morning supplies of Zavat-based foods. Afternoon supplies had been hit too. In addition, temporary electrical breakdowns were occurring in parts of the town. Already a few brave citizens were complaining and asking questions. How did this happen? He demanded. The programs for Zavat distribution and power supply have been tampered with, explained Revna calmly. Some programs have been corrupted, others totally destroyed. That insufferable child, barked the Lord Procurator of Kirith. How did she get into the computer room? Revna shrugged her shoulders, a little too nonchalantly, thought Huldar. Distribution must recommence immediately. The machines will all have to be reprogrammed, my lord, she continued. The girl destroyed our backup systems as well. It'll take several days. Then see to it immediately, Revna. I was awaiting your instructions, my lord, replied Revna. Then do it now. At once, she said. In the meantime, might I suggest that some of our meat and drink be given to the people? Just go, Revna. As she left, Revna smiled to herself. She hadn't disclosed the fact that she had received the reports of Ace's interference some hours ago, and had kept the news to herself until now. If Lord Huldar's position was in danger of being undermined, Revna was determined that she was going to use it to her best advantage. It was late afternoon in the seminary. Ace looked out of a narrow window at the people in the streets below. She turned back to Marill. It's still too quiet, she said. Everyone outside just seems to be wandering about in a daze. You've got to remember that they've always been provided for before, he said. Now they've got no food, no heat, and when night comes they'll find they have very little light. I feel sorry for them, said Raphael. They'll have to fend for themselves, said Aaron unsympathetically. It's what the unlike have been doing for years. They'll also start to remember, said Raphael. Couldn't they be spared that? Aaron snorted mockingly. Daniel has organised parties of teachers to go out and tell the people the truth, she said. Will they believe them? Asked Ace doubtfully. You'd be surprised what hunger makes you do, she said. And Kraz will go with them. They'll have to believe their own eyes. Aren't you going too? My people are still dying on the Darkfell, she said. They need the doctor's help. She looked round at Ace, Marill and Raphael. We are going to make another attempt on the harbours. We are going to Kandassi. As night fell, the only illumination in Kirith town came from the flickering lights of candles and the steady electric glow from the council house, which had its own generator. A sharp wind blew through the streets of the town. Another hour passed, and more lights appeared as bonfires were lit and people sat around them for comfort and warmth. They discussed the state of affairs. Many blamed Lord Huldar. Some even spoke critically of the Pangistry. Most, however, were convinced that nothing was seriously wrong. Everything would be all right in the morning. Another hour passed. Rumours buzzed around of a creature swathed in rags and telling strange stories about the forbidden region of the Darkfell. Some said that the creature was accompanied by one of the teachers. Some even said the teacher was Taniel, who, for all her coolness, was still one of the most popular and respected figures in the town. Another hour slipped by into the dead of night. An old woman was found dead in her apartment, her body frozen. A fight broke out between two young men over an apple. People turned away, not wishing to become involved. Others began to look enviously over at the bright warm lights shining in the council house windows. Another hour passed. People began hearing stories of horrors at the harbours. A serious-looking young man criticised the Pangistry and Huldar. Some older people urged him to be quiet. Many others nodded their heads in agreement. At the foot of the town, sparks from a bonfire set alight the thatched roof of a small house. It was almost half an hour before someone had the presence of mind to organise a chain gang to bring water from the river. Another hour passed. A baby awoke, bawling in its mother's arms. The mother looked at it helplessly, unsure what to do. Her stomach was rumbling as much as her child's. In the end, unable to look after it, she left the child crying in her apartment. In the streets outside, a man stopped her. "My fiancée," he said with tears in his eyes. "Have you seen her? Her name is Karina. She's a dancer." A final hour passed. In the council house, Huldar ensured that all the doors and entrances were barred and sealed. In the distance he could see a stream of people holding aloft flaming torches marching up to the council house. As Revna entered his offices, a brick smashed through the window, showering his early morning breakfast of freshly caught fish with shards of bright shining glass.